There are things you don't tell people about the work. Not because it's classified, though most of it is, but because the words you'd need don't exist in any language the living use. I've tried once or twice, late in the evening when the station lights dim to amber and you can almost pretend the viewport is a window onto something natural. I've tried, and what comes out is either too small or too large, and the person across from me gets that particular look. The look that says, "You've been out too long. Come back." So I stopped trying. You keep it inside where it belongs. My name is Kanglim. In the Threshold's records, I am Agent Class 5, Area 202, Cascade Division, status, active. That's the shape of me on paper. The real shape is harder to describe. Colder, probably. A man who made a contract a long time ago with a system older than governments, older than nations, a system built to do the one job the universe requires done. Move the dead from one state to another in the correct order without exception. I was good at the job. Am good at it. That's not pride, that's just accounting. What I'm going to tell you happened roughly 18 months ago, in the weeks before the Vila incident, before the Cascade went public, before any of this became something people argued about on feeds and in committee rooms. Back when it was still our problem and no one else's. I'm telling it now because the boy deserves to have it told, and because I owe him that much, and because owing someone something is still a strange feeling to me, and I want to get used to it before it's too late. So, Area 202. The orbital habitats above the dying parts of Earth are not glamorous. Station housing is tight. The recycled air always smells faintly of polymer, and the people who end up there are either very poor, very stubborn, or running from something. Area 202 is the sector that wraps around the spinward hub of Ring 7, the industrial quarter, workshops, antique traders, food stalls, a school, a repair dock. 40,000 residents packed into 1,700 meters of rotating tube. I've been stationed there for 3 years. The previous agent had burned out, which happens. The work wears on you if you let it. You see things no one else sees and you cannot explain them, and eventually the gap between your reality and everyone else's becomes a canyon you can't shout across. The remnants are the problem. They always are. When a person dies, the cascade processes them. The system reads the biological signature as it ends, generates a transit protocol, and routes the consciousness. Whatever that means exactly, and I won't pretend I fully understand it, through to the next stage. It's infrastructure. It's been running since before any human civilization had a name for it. The cascade doesn't ask for your opinion, and it doesn't explain itself. It processes, routes, files, moves on. The problem is the ones who won't go. Some of them are scared. Some of them are angry. Some of them simply don't understand what's happened yet. And some, the ones that make the work genuinely dangerous, have been dead long enough that they've stopped being the person they were and become something else. Something that occupies the same space as the living but no longer follows the same rules. The cascade calls them remnants. We call them problems. My job was to find them, contain them in my shade lock, and route them manually. Simple enough in principle. In practice, standing in the dark corners of a recycling station at 2 in the morning, while something that used to be human bends the geometry of the room around you and screams in a frequency that rattles your back teeth. 3 years of that. You get used to it the way you get used to anything. You stop sleeping well, and you start keeping your shade lock on your belt even when you're eating breakfast, and you stop forming attachments because attachments make you slow, and slow gets people hurt. Black Shark was my shade lock. I named it, which you're not supposed to do, too sentimental, the department manual says, and the department manual is written by people who have never spent a night alone in a dead man's apartment waiting for the dead man to show up. Black Shark. Matte casing, 15 Dan memory, converts to a combat configuration at a touch, a short blade that disrupts the resonance field that remnants use to hold themselves together in our layer of spacetime. Good tool. Reliable, we understood each other. The night it went wrong was a Thursday, which is how I know the universe has no sense of drama. There was a remnant in the lower market district. Trader named Haruk, dead 6 days, hadn't transited. The readings were weak, probably a scared one, probably confused, definitely causing interference with the stall equipment in a 3-block radius. I went down at 2200 when the market was mostly shut, and found him behind the stall where he'd sold spare parts for 40 years. He was still wearing his work vest. That gets you sometimes, the details. I won't describe the containment in full because it's not what this story is about, but I'll say it went badly in a way that happens maybe twice in a career. The remnant wasn't Haruk anymore by the time I reached him. 6 days is a long time when you're dead and afraid and the Cascades transit protocol is knocking, and you keep refusing to answer. He degraded past the point of communication. What I found was a field of distorted spacetime about 3 meters across, radiating cold, pulling at the walls. I deployed Black Shark and it went into me. Not the remnant, the backlash of the containment. When a remnant this degraded gets clipped by a shade lock, the resonance inversion can cascade back through the device into the operator. It's like catching a live wire. The technical term is resonance capture. It means the shade lock seals itself around your own signal, reads you as the thing it was supposed to contain. I was in Black Shark before I understood what had happened. Not dead, not exactly. Suspended, my biological body still upright, probably still breathing, heart still running its rhythm, but my operative consciousness compressed into a 15-dan memory cell the size of a thumbnail. The remnant, freed of the containment attempt, dispersed on its own shortly after. I could feel the resonance dissipate. I could feel everything. In fact, the tool's sensors are extraordinarily sensitive when you're trapped inside them, but I couldn't act, couldn't transmit, couldn't do anything except exist in a box small enough to fit in a jacket pocket. And then, eventually, someone picked up the box. His name was Park Soley, but everyone called him Little Park, which embarrassed him because he was 12 and thought he was practically grown. He lived 2 levels up from the market with his grandfather, who ran the only proper antique shop left in Area 202. An old man named Park Hwan who'd refused to leave Ring 7 when everyone with options did, and whose shop smelled of old metal and lacquered wood and things that had been places and survived. Little Park had been helping his grandfather close up for the night and had taken a shortcut through the lower market. He found my body, still standing, which must have been alarming, and Black Shark on the ground beside it. I know all this because the shade lock sensors tell a complete story. I was present for everything. I simply couldn't respond. He stood there for a while looking at me. 12 years old, slight build, the kind of face that shows everything it's thinking, wearing a patched jacket 2 sizes too large that had probably belonged to his grandfather. He looked at my body. He looked at Black Shark. He picked up Black Shark. I felt the moment his hand closed around the casing. He had resonance sensitivity. Not trained, not calibrated, not anything the Cascade would have flagged under normal protocols because it wasn't strong enough to show on passive scans. But raw, the kind of raw sensitivity that a child has before the world talks them out of believing what they see. He'd grown up in the antique shop, surrounded by objects that had absorbed the resonance of decades and owners and histories. He'd been breathing that particulate his whole life. When he touched Black Shark, the device recognized him as a valid operator, which was not supposed to be possible. Shade locks are agent-specific, biometric seal, resonance locked to a single approved operator. The manuals are clear on this point. Little Park held up Black Shark and said, quietly, in the Korean his grandfather had taught him alongside the station's common tongue, "Hello." And I could suddenly hear myself think. Not free, still contained, but the resonance seal had loosened enough for me to be present to him. The way a radio signal finds a receiver, he was the receiver, untrained, accidental. And standing in the lower market at 2200 with my comatose body 3 meters away, but a receiver nonetheless. I said, "Don't scream." He screamed, briefly. Then he stopped and looked at the device in his hands with an expression that I can only describe as deeply betrayed. "You're in the phone," he said. "It's not a phone. It's a shade lock. I'm in the shade lock. This is temporary. You're a ghost. I am not a ghost. I am a threshold agent currently experiencing resonance capture in my own containment device, which is an embarrassing professional situation, and I would appreciate if you didn't tell anyone. He stared at the device for a long moment. Why is your body standing up? Autonomic persistence. My body is fine. I need you to take the device to the Cascade Access Terminal on Level 4, Sublevel 3, behind the Water Reclamation Unit. There's a panel with a red. I know where that is, he said. My grandfather took me there once. He said it was important. That stopped me. Your grandfather knows about the access terminal. He knows about a lot of things, Little Park said, with the particular tone of a child who has accepted that adults have secrets and is mildly irritated about it. He used to tell me not to be scared when I saw things that weren't there. I understood then. The grandfather had known what his grandchild could see, had known about the Cascades infrastructure well enough to locate a field terminal, and had told the boy only this: don't be scared. Which was, I thought, either very wise or very insufficient, and probably both. Take me to the terminal, I said. We'll sort this out. What about your body? It'll follow. He looked at the standing body of a grown man in a threshold field coat with his eyes open and no expression, and then he looked at the device in his hands. Okay, he said, and he started walking. I need to explain the Cascade before I explain what happened next, because none of what happened next makes any sense without it. The Cascade is not a place in the way that Ring 7 is a place. It exists in the same space as the physical world, but offset. Imagine a second skin on every wall, every floor, every corridor, a layer of running code and channeled resonance that most people will live and die without ever perceiving. It processes approximately 170,000 deaths per day across the human-inhabited parts of the solar system. It files, routes, maintains. It is overseen by a governing intelligence called UMLA, ancient name, terrible disposition, absolutely committed to order. Ghost messengers, threshold agents, are UMLA's field staff. We're the ones who handle the exceptions. I had been an exception once myself. That's how the contract works. You are offered a choice at a moment when choices are hard to make, and if you agree to the terms, you enter service. You work. You are good at it or you are not, and if you are not, the department reassigns you to something less demanding, or you burn out, or occasionally something worse. I had buried the reason for my contract a long time ago. 3 years in Area 202 had made burying it easier. You fill your time with the work, and the work fills you back, and eventually, the thing you buried is just a pressure behind the sternum that you've learned to breathe around. Little Park didn't know any of this. He was 12 years old and he was walking through the lower market carrying a device that contained a government operative in his jacket pocket, with said operative's empty body following 3 paces behind, and he was asking questions. What are the things I see, the ones that aren't there? Remnants, people who have died and haven't transited yet. Why don't they transit? Various reasons: fear, unfinished business. Some of them are angry, some of them are confused. Some of them are scary. Yes, I've seen some scary ones. I know. I'd reviewed the Area 202 incident logs on my way in 3 years ago. There had been a cluster of remnant sightings in the antique shop district. One report from the school, a child unnamed had described seeing a dark man in the hallway who made the lights flicker. No follow-up action below the threshold for field response. I had passed it by. I pass a lot of things by. That's the job: triage, prioritize, move efficiently. He hadn't been below any threshold. He'd been a 12-year-old child seeing things in his school hallway that no child should see, and the department had filed it under insufficient signature and moved on. I'm sorry, I said. He looked at the device in his hand with some surprise. For what? You should have had a field contact, someone to explain what you were seeing. You should have been listed." He was quiet for a moment. "Grandfather said I was special." "Your grandfather is correct. He also said it was dangerous." "Your grandfather is also correct about that." We reached level 4. I walked him through the access procedure, the resonance key sequence on Black Shark's underside, the specific panel layout behind the water reclamation unit, and he did it without hesitation. Precise hands, good spatial memory, didn't panic when the panel opened onto the gray half-light of the Cascade's physical access layer, which looks exactly as strange as it sounds. The release terminal was a column of shifting light. He held Black Shark up to it the way I told him, pressed the sequence, and I felt the containment field begin to loosen. That was when the station alarms went off. Not maintenance alarms, not atmosphere alarms. The kind of alarm that sounds in the deep infrastructure of a habitat when the Cascade itself is being attacked. I had heard that alarm exactly once before, in a training scenario, and the instructor had said, "If this ever sounds in your area, do not wait for backup because backup will not arrive in time." "What is that?" Little Park said. "Put Black Shark back in your pocket. We need to move." "But you..." "I am still contained, I know. That is a secondary problem. Move." He moved. The Cascade access layer had gone from gray half-light to something darker. The resonance signatures I was reading through Black Shark's sensors were wrong, inverted, the way a remnant signature goes wrong but multiplied by an order of magnitude. Not one remnant, not a cluster, a deliberate release. Something or someone had opened the gates on a section of the transit queue and flooded Area 202's Cascade layer with unprocessed remnants, all at once, all at full density. It was not random, it was a weapon. I had heard rumors. In the Cascade's operational network there are always rumors, intelligence fragments, half-confirmed reports passed agent to agent. A faction, the rumors said. Something operating in the margins of the Cascade's jurisdiction, something that had discovered that remnants, properly destabilized and deployed in sufficient numbers, could do to a habitat what a bomb does but slower and more completely. Not just destruction, contamination. Living residents exposed to a full-density remnant flood would begin experiencing resonance disruption, hallucinations, spatial disorientation, system failures in anything that used Cascade-adjacent infrastructure, which in a modern habitat is nearly everything. 40,000 people in Ring 7, 1,700 meters of rotating tube. "I need you to listen to me carefully," I said. Little Park was pressed against a wall in the Cascade layer, watching the dark shapes move through the gray half-light with an expression of focused terror. He was scared. He was also not running, which told me something about him. "I'm listening," he said. "I am going to give you access to Black Shark's active functions. That means you can use the containment field. You've never used it before. It will feel strange. Don't fight it, let it extend from your hand like you're reaching for something." "I thought it was locked to you." "You have enough sensitivity to operate it in emergency mode. The Cascade recognizes you as a provisional operator. I checked the access logs when you opened the panel." I paused. "You should not be able to do this. You are 12 years old and you have no formal training, and what I am asking you to do is something that threshold agents train for years to do. I want to be honest with you about that." He looked at the shapes in the half-light. They were coalescing, taking on density, the way degraded remnants do when they're not going anywhere, when the transit protocols have been blocked. Faces, parts of faces, the particular hollow look that comes when someone has been dead long enough to stop remembering what they looked like. "What happens if I don't?" he said. "I stay contained. The remnant flood continues. The station starts to come apart around us. And if I do, there is a chance we stop it." He was quiet for 3 full seconds. I counted. "Okay," he said. He held out his hand. I walked him through the activation sequence. Not the full sequence, the emergency mode, The one that doesn't require calibration because it reads intent rather than memorized input. And Black Shark's containment field opened in his palm like a second hand made of light. He said nothing, he just looked at it. Then the first wave hit us. I will not pretend the next 40 minutes were clean. They were not clean. I was a voice in a box in a child's pocket, while a child with raw, untrained sensitivity fought a coordinated remnant incursion in the cascade infrastructure of a 40,000-person habitat. Nothing about that sentence should be possible. He was terrified. I could feel it through the device's resonance sensors, his heart rate spiking, his breathing shallow and fast, the way his hand shook when the first remnant came close enough to resolve into something recognizable. A woman, maybe. Dead long enough that the edges were soft, the details dissolving, hair that wasn't quite hair, a face that kept trying to be a face and not quite managing. She came toward him and he stood his ground. I felt him almost break. His heart rate hit 160, and his free hand grabbed at the wall behind him for purchase. Then he said out loud, "I see you, it's okay, come here." And she did. The containment field took her cleanly. I almost couldn't believe it. That's what untrained sensitivity does when it works right. It's completely different from a trained agent's approach. I would have deployed the field as a tool, a device, a thing I was doing at the remnant. Targeted, calculated, efficient. The field would have chased. He deployed it as an invitation. He opened his hand and meant it, and the remnant understood the meaning in a way that resonance geometry doesn't fully account for, but that anyone who's done this work long enough knows is real. The dead are not stupid. They are lost. A hand offered in good faith is not the same as a net thrown. 30 seconds between containments, roughly. The waves were dense but not infinite. Whoever was doing this had mass, not precision. They were flooding the sector, not targeting. The second wave was worse. 3 remnants at once, all degraded past recognition, all pulling at the geometry of the cascade layer in ways that made the gray half-light pulse and fracture. The temperature dropped. I could feel it through the device sensors, a drop of maybe 8 degrees in less than 4 seconds, which is what happens when that much entropy condenses in one space. Little Park's breathing went ragged. "I can't," he started. "You can, the field is still open. Let them come to you, don't chase. There are 3 of them." "I know, hold your ground." He held his ground. I do not know what it cost him to do that. I know what it costs me, and I've been trained. I know the specific quality of cold that a mass remnant incursion produces, the way it sits behind your eyes as much as on your skin, the way it makes your thoughts feel slow and thick, the way the shapes in the half-light start to seem like they recognize you. For a trained agent, it's manageable. For a 12-year-old who learned about all of this an hour ago, on a Thursday night, when he was supposed to be walking home after helping his grandfather close up. He held his ground. 2 of the 3 came to the field. The third circled. It was more coherent than the others, not fully degraded, still holding a shape that was roughly human, moving with what I can only describe as deliberation. This one had not been swept up accidentally in the gate breach. This one had come through it with something like intent. "The one on your left," I said. "Don't look directly at it, peripheral." "Why not directly?" "Because coherent remnants can read attention. If it knows you see it as a threat, it'll destabilize faster, and that's harder to contain. Look past it." "Like you're not looking at a dog that might bite," he said. "Exactly like that. Grandfather told me that." He looked past the coherent remnant. His heart rate dropped 10 points, deliberate effort, visible in the sensor data. He breathed out. He opened his hand wider. The remnant circled once more. Twice. Then it stopped moving and I felt the resonance shift, the particular shift that happens when a remnant makes a choice instead of just drifting, and it came to the field. He took all 3. "Talk to me," he said, between the 3rd and 4th wave. "I'm here. I know you're here, talk to me. I need to hear something." So I talked. I told him about Black Shark first, why I named it, which I had never told anyone. A previous partner, I said, years ago. Someone who had been fast and reliable and had moved through the dark without hesitation, and who was gone now, and whose name I had put into the casing of a tool so that it would be said aloud at least once in a while. He listened without comment, which is more than most adults would have done. I told him about Area 202, about the market district at 2200, about the smell of polymer and old circuit boards, and the particular silence of a station sector after commercial hours when the only sounds are the ventilation cycle and the distant thrum of the rotation engines. About the 3 years of work in the dark corners that had filled the space where other things used to be. About what it feels like to do a job that no one can see you doing, to spend your nights securing infrastructure that keeps 40,000 people alive without any of them knowing the infrastructure exists. I talked and he listened, and the containment field stayed steady in his hand. The waves came in irregular intervals, 3 minutes, then 8, then immediately again. Whoever was controlling the breach was not a system. A system would be regular. This was a person or persons, watching the cascade layer and modulating the release rate based on what they saw, which meant they could see us. "They're watching," I said. He didn't panic. "What do we do?" "Nothing differently. If they're watching, they're still trying to measure something. Let them measure. Don't change your approach." "What are they measuring?" "How long before you break?" He was quiet for a moment. "What if I do?" "You haven't yet." "That's not an answer." "No," I said. "It isn't." I paused. "If you break, I'll tell you and we'll adjust. You're not alone in this." The 4th wave. Then the 5th. Then a gap of nearly 12 minutes during which the gray half-light was still and cold and both of us simply waited. I kept talking, lower now, filling the silence with things I hadn't said to anyone in years. Not confessions, I don't deal in confessions. Just the texture of the work, the specific loneliness of a job that exists in the margin between what people know and what is actually true. He listened. Occasionally he asked questions, careful ones, the questions of someone who genuinely wants to understand rather than someone who is just making noise to stay calm. Although he was also doing that. 17 contained in 40 minutes. In the field manual, a major incursion is defined as 5 or more remnants in active deployment. This was not a major incursion by any taxonomy I was trained in. This was a statement. Someone had spent considerable resources to make this a statement, and the statement they intended was, your field agent is neutralized and your sector is exposed, and there is nothing a 12-year-old boy can do about that. They were wrong on the last count. The flood broke when the Cascade's emergency protocols finally kicked in. UMLA's system recognized the anomaly and began counteracting the gate breach from the other side. It takes that long because the system is designed to be certain before it acts, and certainty takes time. When it broke, the gray half-light of the cascade layer went quiet all at once, like a sound cutting off. Little Park stood in the middle of it, Black Shark in his hand, breathing hard. He didn't say anything for a moment. "Then did we do it?" "The incursion is stopped," I said. "The station's cascade layer will need recalibration. There may be resonance residue in the upper levels for a day or two. People will see things. The department will send cleanup teams." I paused. "You did well." He laughed. It was a strange sound in the quiet of the layer, genuine, slightly exhausted, with the particular relief of someone who has just discovered that the terrible thing they feared was survivable. I didn't feel like I did well. I felt like I was guessing the whole time. "You were, that's what the work is." He looked at the device in his hand. "You can come out now, right? The terminal is still active." "Yes." He walked back to the access column and held Black Shark up to it, and this time when he pressed the sequence. The containment field released completely. Coming out of a shade lock after resonance capture is not a comfortable experience. I won't belabor it. When it was over, I was standing in the cascade access layer, body and consciousness rejoined, and little Park was standing 2 meters away with Black Shark in his extended hand, offering it back. I took it. We looked at each other for a moment. The boy who was not supposed to be able to use an agent-locked shade lock, and the agent who was not supposed to need rescuing by a 12-year-old. Under the station's emergency amber lighting, he looked younger than 12. He also looked like someone who had just done something that would take years to fully understand. "Your grandfather," I said. "He knows more than he told you." "I know. That conversation is going to need to happen." "I know that too." He looked at the shade lock in my hand. "Black Shark, that's a good name." "Don't tell the department I named it." "I won't." He paused. "What happens now?" It was a reasonable question. I turned it over. The department protocols were clear enough. The incursion would be investigated, the gate breach analyzed, the faction responsible identified and addressed. That work would take months and involve people senior to me, people with resources and access I didn't have. My role would be to file a thorough incident report and return to standard operations. Standard operations. Area 202. The dark corners and the 2200 check-ins, and the work that fills the space where other things used to be. "You'll be listed," I said. "Formally. A field contact will be assigned to you, someone who can train you properly, explain what you're seeing, give you the protocols." "Will it be you?" I had not expected the question. "No, you should have someone senior, with more experience than." "You explained everything," he said. "From inside a box. You could hear me shaking, and you told me about why you named your phone instead of letting me panic." He said it the way 12-year-olds say the true things, which is directly, without apology. "I want it to be you." The pressure behind my sternum, the one I'd learned to breathe around. "I'll put in the request," I said. He nodded, apparently satisfied. 12 years old, patched jacket 2 sizes too large, standing in the gray half-light of the cascade layer with 17 remnants in a containment device he had no business operating. "My grandfather will have dinner ready," he said. "Go." He went. At the access panel before the physical layer closed behind him, he turned back. "Kanglim." "Yes." "What did you bury?" I didn't answer. He didn't push it. The panel closed. I filed the incident report. All of it, the resonance capture, the provisional operator access, the 17-count containment, the gate breach signature. I named him in the report as a class-viable operator with extraordinary raw sensitivity. I put in the assignment request. UMLA system sent back a denial. Standard grounds, civilian operator, liability, procedural irregularity. I filed a second request, then a third. The third one included the sensor logs from Black Shark, the full 40 minutes, his heart rate and breathing, and the way the containment field opened in his hand, and the 17 remnants going in one after another, invited rather than chased. I attached a note. I have never attached a note to a departmental request in 3 years of service. The note said, "This boy can see what I cannot see anymore. That is not an operational surplus. That is the point." The fourth request was approved. What I know now, 18 months later, with the Vila incident behind us and the Cascade situation changing in ways that are above my clearance level to fully understand, is that the faction responsible for the Area 202 gate breach was larger than a local operation. The signature analysis matched 11 other breaches across the ring habitats over the preceding 2 years. They had been testing. Area 202 was not the target. It was a calibration run, a measurement of how many remnants it took to destabilize a sector, and how long it took a field agent to respond. The answer they got was not the one they planned for. I have thought about why that is, about what they miscalculated. They had intelligence on me, response time, typical approach, known equipment. They knew I would be contained in my own device. What they did not know, because it was not possible to know, was that a 12-year-old boy in a patched jacket would pick up the device, that the boy would have the specific sensitivity to operate it, that he would stand in the dark half-light and hold out his hand and mean it, and that the dead would come to him, because meaning it is different from everything else. You can model a trained agent. You can account for equipment specs and response protocols, and the 17 ways a field operative might handle a mass incursion. You cannot model a child who's been told not to be afraid and has actually listened, standing in the space between the living and the dead and refusing, on no authority except his own, to let either side consume the other. That is what they walked into. That is what they did not have a calculation for. The cascade calls it an anomaly. The department calls it a provisional operator incident, now closed. I call it what it is. A 12-year-old doing what the dead couldn't do and the living had stopped remembering how to do, which is to stand in the dark without flinching and say, "I see you." He's 13 now. His training is ongoing. He has learned the formal protocols, the resonance key sequences, the department taxonomy of remnant types, and the correct containment approaches for each. He has learned to keep his sensitivity calibrated, to see without being consumed by what he sees, which is a skill that takes most agents years to develop, and that he is developing at a rate that makes the senior training officers uncomfortable, in a way that I find satisfying. He still calls it Black Shark. I told him not to twice. The third time I started to say it, he gave me a look that was so precisely like the look I must give UMLA's system when it sends a procedural notice I disagree with that I stopped mid-sentence. He knows where he learned the look. He doesn't mention it. His grandfather makes dinner on Thursdays. I go. The shop is exactly what you'd expect from a man who has spent 60 years collecting the things other people left behind, dense and navigable only if you know the system, which is a system that exists inside the old man's head and nowhere else. Objects from 4 generations of Ring 7 residents. Tools, instruments, fabrics, data chips in formats no current device can read. A shelf of what look like decorative stones that are, I now know, passive resonance accumulators, things that have been touched by the dead, and hold the warmth of that contact. The old man has been cataloging the Cascade's activity from his front room for 30 years, using methods that have no official name and produce no data that any department terminal can process. He knows more than he told the boy. He knows that I know this. Neither of us has said it directly yet. On Thursdays he cooks. The boy does the dishes. I sit at the table and read through the week's incident reports on a handheld that I keep on silent during dinner because the old man dislikes what he calls the habit of carrying the job into the room. He's not wrong about the habit. I'm working on it. The conversations are ordinary. What happened at school? A remnant little park encountered near the maintenance corridor on level 2, minor, easily handled, but his instinct was correct and his containment was clean. What the grandfather found at the morning market. Whether the rotation engines in Ring 7's hub sector are getting louder, which they are, which the maintenance department will get around to addressing sometime in the next decade. Whether I've eaten enough, which I never have. The old man tells stories. He has infinite stories, and they are not always the same story he started telling, and they always end somewhere useful. Last Thursday he told one about a man he'd known when Ring 7 was first built, an engineer, dead 30 years now, who had refused to stop working when his biological diagnosis came in. Kept reporting to his station. Kept doing the calibration checks on the rotation housing. Kept showing up. He wasn't afraid, the grandfather said. He was just not finished. I understood the story. I didn't say so. He didn't need me to. Area 202 is quieter than it used to be. Not safe, nothing in this work is safe, but quieter. The faction has gone to ground. The gate breach signatures have stopped. The department's analysis team has traced the breach architecture to a node somewhere in the outer belt habitats. And the operational response is ongoing at levels I don't have access to. My job remains what it has always been. The sector, the dark corners, the ones who won't go. The difference is that Thursday evenings I have somewhere to be. I sat in the dark last Thursday, after the dinner plates were cleared and the old man was telling his story about the engineer, and the boy was washing dishes badly. He always washes dishes badly, which I have stopped commenting on, and I thought about the moment in the Cascade layer when he had said my name across an access terminal, and the pressure behind my sternum had shifted. Not gone, I'm not that changed, but shifted from something I was breathing around to something I was breathing with. That's what I couldn't have told you before, that the buried thing doesn't always stay buried, that sometimes it moves, slow and unexpected, toward the surface, because something small and stubborn and completely outside your protocols decides it would rather not let it stay down there. That you can spend 3 years making the dark corners of a station safe for 40,000 people who don't know you exist, and then a 12-year-old boy picks up your equipment and stands his ground, and suddenly 40,000 is a number that means something different, has faces attached to it, has a grandfather making soup, has a kid who washes dishes badly and names things he shouldn't name and asks questions you don't have clean answers to. He is 13 years old. He will outlive whatever this work makes of me. He will carry Black Shark's resonance in his hands long after I'm filed and closed and processed through the same infrastructure I spent 3 years maintaining for other people. Good. That's the job. The real job, I mean. Not the forms, not the protocols, not the 17-count containment in a gray half-light at 2200 on a Thursday. Those are the bones. The bones don't walk without something inside them. The real job is making sure the living get to stay that way long enough to become something worth remembering. Something that can stand in the dark without flinching and say, "I see you," and mean it as an offer rather than an accusation. I'm still working on it, we both are.